Good evening and hi, Sai. Welcome to the Okinawa Symposium 2023, jointly hosted by the Quincy Institute, the Okinawa Prefectural Government DC office, and the Okinawa Collection here at the George Washington University. My name is Kristen Luck, and I'm the librarian for the Okinawa Collection and one of the moderators this evening. I would like to welcome Dean Geneva Henry to officially open the symposium. Thank you very much, Dean Henry.
Thank you, Kristen. I will be very brief. Welcome. It is a pleasure to have all of you here. It's a pleasure to reunite with our true friends from the Okinawa Prefecture. Thank you for many things. Thank you for coming. It's like welcoming an old friend back home. So I am very much looking forward to the symposium today. I would be very remiss if I didn't thank Professor Mike Mochizuki for this relationship in the first place. Professor Mochizuki has had a long relationship with the Okinawa Prefecture through his scholarship and bringing the collections to Gelman Library here at George Washington University has been, really a godsend. This attracts scholars truly worldwide who study the relationship between Okinawa and the United States. It's a long, rich relationship. Like all relationships, it has its ups and downs, and it's important to learn from those. In the end, it is truly a bond that I believe will go on for a very long time. So with that, I would like to welcome you to the space of the National Churchill Leadership Center. And the Leadership Center is here due to a very generous donation from the International Churchill Society. And it is a place where we host many international dignitaries who are talking about leadership and explaining to our students, to our faculty, and setting an example of what leadership means and truly moving forward as a partner in the world. And I can't think of anything more fitting than the symposium that we're holding right now. So welcome. Enjoy this afternoon's discussion, and I will turn it back over to Kristen.
Dean Henry, thank you very much for your kind remarks. We will now move on to the keynote speech. Just a quick reminder, if you need interpretation services, please obtain a headset up at the front. Please also note that we'll have a question and answer period after the discussion between Professor Mochizuki and Dr. Swain for any questions from the audience. If you're attending virtually, please submit your question in the live chat function, and the moderator will select questions as appropriate. And for those here in the National Churchill Leadership Center, you will be given the opportunity to ask questions. We'll be passing around a microphone. It is a great honor to introduce our keynote speaker, the Governor of Okinawa, Mr. Denny Tamaki. Please welcome Governor Tamaki.
How are you? Hi, Sai. Gusuyo Chuganabira. Good afternoon, everyone. I came from Okinawa, Japan. My name is Denny Tamaki, Governor of Okinawa Prefecture. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. I would like to express my due respect to Dr. Mike Mochizuki and Dr. Michael Swain, who have always been having interest on Okinawa, also to all the staff of Quincy Institute, George Washington University, co-host of this symposium, who have worked for holding the symposium. Thank you so much for coming to the Okinawa Symposium today. I will do my very best to make today's symposium beneficial to all of you. All right, speak in Japanese. I'm sorry. では、私からは、米国市民である皆さんに、どうしても知ってほしい2つのことについて、 お伝えをしたいと思います。一つ
message,
は
two
沖縄
messages
の
to
米軍基地につい
the
てです。
Americans
沖縄県には31の米軍
in
専用
Okinawa.
施設があり、5万人近くの米
There
軍
are
人、
31
軍
U.S.
属、
military facilities
その
and
家族が
areas
住んでいると言われてい
exclusively
ます。
used by the
その
U.S. forces,
現状や
which is
地
home to
元との
50,000
圧
U.S.
力につい
service
て、
members, civilians, and their families altogether. I will talk about the current situation and the friction with the local communities. The interpreter cannot hear. So,
This one's not working, that one is.
is the slide okay? I would like to talk about. Okay. Okay. Mhm. Thank you. Okay. Now, can you hear? Can you hear the interpreter now? Can you hear the interpreter? Okay. All right. Okay. Now I think we're ready. Thank you. Yes. All right. I think I can start now. All right. Then,
near the Taiwan, so close. And them. どうぞ。Wow!
now, before the main topics, let me talk about my background. I was born in 1959 in Okinawa, specifically in the area where there are many U.S. military bases. My father was stationed in Okinawa, and my mother is Okinawan. When my mother was pregnant with me, my father received an order to return to the U.S. My mother was going to the U.S. after giving birth to me, and my father went back alone. However, when I was about 2 years old, my mother decided not to go to the U.S. So she told him that she was not going, and she threw away my father's photos and the letters. So I don't know how he looks, where he's from, and what kind of person he is.
18 years old. And right side, wow. Real rock and roll. Yeah, today, yes, today. Today is 22 years old. 私は社会福
I graduated from a vocational school on social welfare and got a job at a welfare center for elderlies. Then, that was myself when I was a singer with that rock band. Then I worked in an interior design industry, then as a radio personality and a TV personality. So my career is unusual as a politician. So that's why I want to engage in politics from the viewpoint of ordinary people. I am proud of my upbringing. I grew up watching my mother cooking and cleaning for women who worked at the bars near the bases. So, for me, the U.S. military bases were not a political issue, but an extension of my everyday life. I was living the reality of Okinawans who made a living out of U.S. military base. With this background and the capacity as the leader of a local government in Japan, I have come to Washington, D.C. because I have something I really want to tell American people. Now let's move on to the main topics. Okay? First topic is the U.S. military bases in Okinawa. I want to make my political stance clear. I believe the Japan-U.S. Security Alliance has contributed to maintaining peace and stability in Japan and East Asia. So I continue to understand the importance of the alliance. I also understand the need to maintain the self-defense capability to defend ourselves at the minimum level. Then, even I have such political view, why do I need to come to Washington, D.C. to talk to you? Let me explain why. First of all, why are there U.S. military bases in Okinawa? At the end of World War II, in March 1945, U.S. military landed on Okinawa. Before the war ended in June, 94,000 civilians, or 200,000 in total, lost their lives. During this Battle of Okinawa, the U.S. forces occupied the island and built the bases. That was the beginning. In Okinawa, a monument called the Cornerstone of the Peace was built in 1995. Regardless of nationality and status of military or civilian, names of all who lost their lives by the Battle of Okinawa are engraved. Currently, 241,686 names are engraved, including 14,010 Americans. The U.S. military forced the local people to move to concentration camps. They secured the land and built military bases. Later, Republic of China, People's Republic of China was established in 1949. Then the Korean War started in 1950. As the international situation changes, the strategic value of Okinawa was recognized, and the U.S. military started building large-scale installations. In 1952, the San Francisco Treaty restored Japan's sovereignty. Then, in mainland Japan, complaints about the U.S. military presence and resistance to expansion of U.S. military bases became stronger. So military units relocated one after another to Okinawa from mainland Japan, which was under the U.S. military control. To build new bases, forceful land exploitation took place throughout Okinawa. The local residents fought by sitting down in front of bulldozers and service members with bayonets. This coercive land acquisition is still remembered by Okinawans with the keyword bayonet and bulldozers. This is how U.S. military bases have been in Okinawa. Currently, exclusive U.S. military facilities take 45,674 acres of land, which account for about 8.1% of Okinawa's land area. And if you look at the central part of Okinawa, it's 23.1% of land is taken. And the size of area is as large as the Washington, D.C. area, including water area. So you can imagine how big it is. And Okinawa takes up only 0.6% of Japan's land area, but area-wise, 70.3% of the exclusive military facilities are in Okinawa. The second largest host, Aomori Prefecture, hosts 9%, and Kanagawa Prefecture hosts 5.6%. The gap is huge. Now, let me give you some examples about the issues. Due to the heavy concentration of the military bases, Okinawa sees crimes committed by service members or civilians, as well as aircraft accidents and range fires stemming from military training. As for murder, robbery, rape, and other heinous crimes, between the reversion to Okinawa to Japan in 1972 and 2022, 584 cases have been reported. In 1995, a little girl was raped by service members, and this incident triggered outbursts of anger among local citizens. And in 2016, a civilian affiliated with the U.S. raped, killed a woman and dumped her body. So this reignited some anger among Okinawans. And in recent years, in 2004, a helicopter crashed into a university. In 2016, an Osprey crashed. And in 2017, a helicopter made an emergency landing, then burst into flames. And also, a window frame of a helicopter fell to an elementary school. Noise is another problem. In the middle part of the main island, there are two large airfields, a Marine Corps Air Station and the Kadena Air Base. Around those airfields, permanently stationed aircrafts and visiting aircrafts conduct training day and night, causing noise pollution and exhaust gas odor, which can negatively affect the health of residents. The U.S. military bases seriously impact the environment as well. From the return to land, tar-like substance in metal barrels were found, and more recently, the organofluorine compound, which is regulated in many countries, so-called PFAS, or PFOS, has been detected in river and natural spring around the military base. In 2016, drinking water coming from the area around the Kadena Air Base was indicated to contain high level of PFOS, exceeding the index value. So water intake from some of the water sources is prohibited now. And the underground water survey around the base shows that PFOS level is below the standard value of 50 nanogram per liter at the upper stream, but after going through the air base, the level is as high as over 200 nanogram per liter. So we think the cause of the contamination is likely to be inside the air station. Since the contamination was detected, Okinawa has been requesting access to the air station, but U.S. forces reject the request. Removing the contaminated soil will improve or restore the water quality, according to some experts, and this drinking water is supplied to the U.S. bases, so improving the water quality will protect the health of U.S. service members and the civilians who are U.S. citizens. U.S. military always present their policy to be a good neighbor, so I strongly request them to grant access to the air station to be a true good neighbor.
Now, allow me to speak about the Futenma Air Base. This is relocated right in the middle of downtown, and it accounts for a quarter of the entire land space of Ginowan City. And the surrounding area, there are many schools. There are 10 elementary schools, 5 middle school, 4 high school, 1 university, and other public facilities and hospitals that are in their area. In 2003, then Secretary of Defense Mr. Rumsfeld saw the site from up in the sky. This picture is from the 2003, but accordingly, he has mentioned that this was the most dangerous airbase. In 2004, there was a helicopter accident that crashed into the university property. There are many other incidents as well, and the noise pollution is also a big problem. In 1995, the public outburst was triggered by an assault of a girl by the service men, U.S. military men, and therefore in 1996, both countries, the governments have agreed to the return of 11 U.S. facilities, including Futenma Air Base. However, after 27 years, the return has not been actualized just yet. That is because upon the agreement was based on the relocation of the facility to be done within Okinawa prefecture. There is no agreement from the people of Okinawa. And I am also strongly against the Henoko relocation. One of the reasons is because of the strong public opinion against this relocation within Okinawa of Futenma Air Base. And this is reflected in various elections, such as 2014, 2018, and 2022 gubernatorial election, as well as the referendum done by the 41 municipalities in 2019, which showed that 72% of the voters voted against the relocation. So it is quite clear. The public opinion is quite clear. The second reason is because Henoko Ora Bay has an extremely rich biodiversity. And in this area, there is a this national treasure called dugong. There are over 5,300 species of living organisms, including 262 endangered species. 1,300 of the species could include new types of species. Therefore, our natural resource is an irreplaceable asset, and we must pass it down to our next generation. The third reason why I am against is really based on a technological issue. Under the seabed of Aurora Bay, there is a mayonnaise-like soft subsoil over 163 acres. Therefore, the feasibility of the reclamation is really doubtful. Therefore, in order to improve this situation, one must have to embed over 70,000 stakes, which is about 80-inch in diameter. Therefore, what this shows is that Henoko relocation does not remove the danger of the Futenma air base. So both countries must not be bound by the idea that Henoko is the only solution, but also we must consider the relocation outside Okinawa or outside Japan. Lastly, I would like to talk about the base and the economy. You see, there are some people who'd say, yes, Okinawa military base does offer a lot of issues. However, without the base, the economy in Okinawa does not survive. That being said, you see, Okinawa used to be a highly dependent on the base. However, in 1972, after the reversion, as the infrastructure such as dam, airports, ports, roads were developed, the tourism industry was developed, and followed by the information communication industry as well. As a result, the income based on the base-related income accounted for 15.5% back in 1972, but now that has decreased to 5.1%. As a matter of fact, after some bases are returned to Okinawa, it has given positive impact to the prefectural economy. There are 3 regions that are successful in such that, and altogether, it is shown that the direct economic impact was 245.9 billion yen, and the employment grew to 23,564 people, which is 72 times. Now, in terms of the other military sites that are scheduled to return, I hope that it is estimated that there should be a direct economic impact and growth of employment 18 times by using this site. Now, allow me to talk about a different perspective from the U.S. and China relations. Of course, as you know, the East Asia security environment is rapidly changing. Okinawa is the closest Japanese local government physically to Taiwan. They're about 400 miles from Okinawa to Taiwan, but there's only 65 miles from Yonaguni, which is the closest or the farther west island to Taiwan. Therefore, the 1.5 million prefectural population is extremely concerned about the Taiwan contingency. During the time when Okinawa was an independent kingdom, it has a history of trade and human interaction, not just with China, but also with other Southeastern Asian as well. The Japanese government made a major shift in its defense policy last December in order to strengthen the southwest region adjacent to the Taiwan Strait. Within that, the counter-strike capability, which some have pointed out as being incompatible with the conventional idea of an exclusively defense posture, has been introduced, and the defense budget will see an increase of 1.6 times. In the 2+2 meeting between Japan and the U.S. in January this year, the two countries resolved to strengthen deterrence and promote bilateral efforts toward modernization. However, my belief is that this strengthening of deterrence through military buildup will only increase tensions in the region, and that it would lead to unforeseen situations. And we believe that Okinawa should never become a target of attack due to the concentration of U.S. military bases in our region. With respect to possession of counterstrike capability, some point out the issue of the government's opinion on the purpose of Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, and the possibility of this capability being regarded as preemptive strike, which is prohibited by the international law. Some also point out the issue in regards to inconsistency with the existing policy of exclusively defense posture. The recent media reports regarding a senior U.S. military official warnings of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan by 2025 and the shocking results of a think tank simulation of a Taiwan contingency may make people think that a Taiwan contingency is a reality. However, is that really the case? In a Taiwanese public opinion survey conducted by a Taiwanese think tank last August, 52.7% of the respondents answered disagree to the question China will invade, exceeding the 39% who answered agree. So some reports analyze that Taiwanese people perhaps are calmly accepting China's military exercises and others, and then the possibility of an actual clash is not that high. Mr. Yuji Miyamoto, who served as Japan's ambassador to China, mentioned in an interview with a local newspaper that the possibility of a military invasion of Taiwan by China is close to zero. He said that if Taiwan decides on a specific date or declares independence from China, or if the U.S. rejects the One China principle, the Chinese will have more reason to take up the cause, and the possibility will increase. However, at least for now, that is not the case. If China invades Taiwan, it will lead to a clash between the U.S. and China and will bring global recession, which will cripple China's economy, and many lives will be lost. Without any convincing cause, the Chinese public will not be convinced, and they will decide that an invasion is a tough sell. Not surprisingly, if one thinks about how the invasion of Ukraine by Russia has had such a huge impact on the global economy. Now, let us look at the economic relations between the U.S., Japan, and China. If you look at according to the trade statistics released by the U.S. Department of Commerce last month, the total amount of imports and exports between the U.S. and China last year totaled $690.5 billion, the highest ever. In 2019, before the pandemic, China was the largest trading partner for Japan, and for China, Japan is the second largest trading partner after the U.S. The number of overseas offices of Japanese companies is the largest in China. A military clash between the U.S. and China would mean the loss of such mutual relations and damage to the national interests of the U.S., Japan, and China. In light of such economic relationships and various views on the Taiwan contingency, one must ask, is the strengthening of defense the only policy that can ensure regional security? You see, I believe that a Taiwan contingency should never occur, and I believe that Okinawa must never again be used as a battlefield. Therefore, I appeal to the Japanese and the U.S. governments to promote peaceful diplomacy and dialogue to reduce tensions and build confidence before strengthening defense capability. Okinawa Prefecture should also make the most of its soft power, such as its unique historical and cultural characteristics and its international network. And we can play that role in order for the development in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, in the end, I do have something to ask favor of you. You see, I came to Washington, D.C. I asked that it will be your turn to come to Okinawa. Okinawa is one of Japan's most popular tourist destinations. Okinawa has a subtropical climate, rich forests, emerald green sea, and white sandy beaches. And it is also the birthplace of the famous karate, which was made popular in the Best Kid movie, or Karate Kid movie. But also, it is a land of amazing traditional arts, crafts. In addition to the unique Okinawan cuisine that has been nurtured through the long history and interaction with other countries, Okinawa is also home to awamori, which is a famous sake that becomes more and more delicious the older it is aged. I hope that you will come to Okinawa someday and enjoy its natural environment, cultural and historical history, and that you will be healed, delighted, and moved by them. We also hope that you can also visit the Foundation of Peace to experience the spirit of Okinawa's quest for peace and see the current situation of the bases with your own eyes. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Governor Tamaki. My name is Mike Mochizuki, and I'm a faculty member here at George Washington University and also a non-resident fellow of the Quincy Institute. I want to join everybody in welcoming you back to George Washington University, and thank you very much for that excellent overview of the situation in Okinawa. And I'm glad you started out with your personal experiences, but I would have to say you were probably overly modest about your personal background. You are not only someone who has played a role as a radio personality, but you are an accomplished rock musician and singer. And I would urge all of you to, I think, go on YouTube and you'll see some of his clips of him playing the guitar and singing. I think it was in 2019 that you performed in one of the largest, or maybe it is the largest outdoor festival called Rock Fuji. And so I just wanted you to know a little bit more about his personal background. So Governor Tamaki ended up in talking about U.S.-China relations and the predicament that this places not only on Japan, but especially on Okinawa. So I want to turn to my good friend Michael Swain, who is a senior fellow at the Quincy Institute and one of the foremost specialists on U.S.-China security relations and Chinese military strategy, to give his perspective on how the increasing intensification of U.S.-China strategic competition and the worsening of the Taiwan situation, what that really means for Okinawa and what ought to be done about this. So Michael.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you, Governor Tamaki. It's a pleasure to see you again. As Mike said, I'm not a Okinawa expert. I'm certainly not an Okinawa base expert. I've become familiar with it largely through interaction with Mike and his interaction with the Okinawan government over the years, and have traveled out there and given briefings to predecessors to Tamaki, Governor Tamaki, and others. My main area is, as Mike says, U.S.-China security issues, and of course Okinawa plays a major role in that. As Governor Tamaki suggested, Okinawa is really a location that is in some ways on the front line, or could be on the front line, between the U.S. and China in a conflict within Northeast Asia, and particularly over Taiwan, given in particular its proximity to Taiwan. As the governor said, the closest island in Okinawa inhabited is only 65 miles from Taiwan. That's closer than mainland China is to Taiwan. And the bulk of U.S. forces in the Western Pacific are arguably located in Okinawa. And the U.S. could not prosecute any kind of war or confrontation with China over Taiwan without employing its bases in Japan, and particularly in Okinawa. Aircraft, submarines, surface warships, missiles, and of course munitions stockpiles, all emanating from Japan, the Japanese islands, in particular Okinawa. Now, because of the growing tensions and the growing threat as perceived by the United States and Japan regarding both China and North Korea, Japan has indeed decided to increase its defense spending, as the governor had just said. Although you've often heard in the press that it's a doubling from 1% to 2% of GDP, that's kind of a misnomer. Japanese defense increasing is not that high, although it is going up, certainly. And the Japanese government has decided to acquire some new types of capabilities, including offensive missile capabilities that would be directed potentially at North Korea and or at China. Now, some of these augmentations are necessary, I think, to try to sustain a credible level of deterrent capability, just in case, with both North Korea and with China. Although, as I'll say more in a minute, they are by no means the only way to deal with or establish stability in Northeast Asia, as the governor says. An exclusive or heavy reliance on deterrence alone will not provide the kind of stability that we need in this part of the world. As I say, Japan and U.S. bases in Japan, including in Okinawa, need to increase their defense capabilities, in particular in the area of resilience. That is to say, hardening. That is to say, the ability to be able to withstand any sort of potential attack. We did a recent study at the Quincy Institute, some of you may have seen, of the U.S. force posture in the Western Pacific that placed a very high emphasis on the need for Japan and the United States to strengthen their defensive capabilities within the home islands and within across Okinawa, so that any kind of Chinese or North Korea attack would be deterred because it wouldn't do as much damage and degrade the capability of these countries, of Japan and the United States to respond. There's also a need, frankly, to acquire the capability to interdict Chinese forces if they were to try to blockade or attack Taiwan. And that doesn't mean go after the Chinese mainland right off the bat in a conflict. It means to be able to deny Chinese forces or North Korean forces, if they were to do so, from moving offshore and attacking any part of either Taiwan or Japan, such as the Senkaku Islands, which are, of course, a point of contention between China and the U.S. However, aside from interdiction capabilities, in my view, I don't think it's necessary for Japan to deploy these offensive missiles oriented towards the Chinese mainland as a kind of equal deterrent to the fact that the Chinese have offensive missiles aimed at Japan. And there are a lot of reasons why I don't think that would be necessary. Interdiction of aircraft and ships moving across the strait is one thing. Actually attacking, particularly preemptively, China with missiles based in Okinawa is something entirely different. And I am not in support of that. Now, it's important to keep in mind in all of this, and I think Governor Tamaki's position is sort of inherent here in this, is that Japan is not immediately obligated to come to the assistance of the United States under any contingency in the event of a Taiwan conflict. It's not automatically obligated to support a Taiwan contingency. The Japanese government has certainly expressed concern over stability in the Taiwan Strait, and it has indicated that a conflict over Taiwan could indeed affect Japan's security, but Tokyo has not explicitly identified a Japanese defense of Taiwan, if attacked, with the defense of Japanese territory, which is what the justification is for the self-defense forces under the Constitution. This kind of distance, if you will, flexibility, gives, in my view, Japan some leverage in influencing U.S. actions. I am not a believer that the United States always has the right answer in dealing with a China contingency regarding Taiwan. I think that Japan is its own actor, it has its own agency, Yes, it is an ally of the United States and a stalwart ally, but it doesn't have to endorse every kind of decision that might be made that could, in some cases, put Japan in jeopardy in ways that Japan might not want to accept. So, in my view, there's a strong need for Japan to convey its concern that both China and the U.S. are today moving toward excessive stress on military buildups over the use of diplomacy, just as the governor had stated a minute ago. There's an increased desire to stress military deterrence in order to show greater resolve, because there's a fear that the Chinese themselves are deciding to avoid peaceful go away from peaceful unification and use force. So there's a mutually reinforcing worst case assessment going on between the U.S. and China. And I think it's incumbent upon Japan in this to remind both sides that their original understanding that established peace across the Taiwan Strait was an understanding based on restraint, not based on military deterrence. In particular, I think on the diplomatic front, the U.S. and the Japanese government need to reaffirm their respective one China policies. They need to strengthen those types of reassurances alongside any kind of deterrence capabilities and make it clear, affirming government limits on relations with Taiwan, affirming clear opposition to any unilateral changes by Taiwan toward unification or independence, and conveying a clear willingness to engage in mutual restraint regarding both PLA or PRC military deployments and U.S. military deployments or weapon sales to Taiwan. I think there needs to be more of this kind of dialogue, both within Japan, within the U.S., and then ultimately between those two countries and China. But to do this, the U.S. and China and Japan need to recognize that all parties are contributing to the downward spiral, the increased emphasis on deterrence over reassurance, and this slide, as I see it, that we are in today toward a crisis over the Taiwan issue at some point in the future. As I say, both countries or both sides are moving in a direction in which the worst case outcome seems to be the only outcome. There's an increasing talk of conflict in the U.S. as if it's almost inevitable, which it is not. But it needs to see a more viable alternative that emphasizes the diplomatic side of the equation and the assurance side of the equation. So I think Okinawa itself, although obviously is not the Tokyo government, is obviously not representing Japan per se, but it can still play an important role in reaffirming this need to have this kind of restraint and this kind of balance without rejecting the idea of U.S. forces in Okinawa by any means, or rejecting the assumptions that underlay the alliance. There needs to be some greater stress about dealing with these kinds of negative dynamics that operate on both sides. Because as I say, military deterrence alone is not going to avert conflict across the Taiwan Strait, nor will a mere repetition of the mantra that we still uphold the one China policy, which is what the U.S. government and the Japanese government still repeat. But it is becoming increasingly hollow in the views of both the Chinese and others, just as the Chinese assertion that it continues to observe a desire for peaceful unification is growing somewhat hollow in light of Chinese military deployments. So I think that's important. A last point I'll make is that I think that Okinawa can also play a role in highlighting the need, as part of the diplomacy and the war avoidance, the need for greater crisis management and crisis avoidance in the U.S.-China, and I dare say the U.S.-China-Japan dialogue. We have had discussions between the United States and China on issues involving what's called crisis communication, but they have not gone very far. They've been limited to the military realm, focused very much on incidents at sea and avoiding certain types of incidents, and they have not really grappled with the basic problems that exist in perceptions, outlooks, assumptions, values, decision-making processes that could be obstacles to effective crisis management. I've been involved for many years in a project with American colleagues, Mike's been involved in this, and with the Chinese in talking about crisis behavior, how our countries look at military political crises. This has been on a track 2 level, as they call it, unofficial level, but it has fed into government decision making on both sides. I think that level, that exchange should be extended and deepened. It would be great if the Okinawa government would also support that kind of action, because I think it's important, and the Japanese government should become involved in that as well. So I think there's much that Okinawa can do to put the U.S., Japan, and China on the right track toward a more stable and predictable Asian security environment. It can be a voice for restraint and conflict avoidance within the Japanese debate, and I hope it seeks to play that role in the future. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Michael. So, I do want to give Governor Tamaki a chance to respond to your remarks, Michael, but I'd just like to kind of maybe add a couple of points. Certainly, I agree with you, Michael, about the need to have some constraints or restraints on the downward spiral in U.S.-China relations over Taiwan, and reassurance is really important, and deterrence alone is not going to stabilize the situation. But one of the problems is that Japan, rather than being a voice of restraint, is in a sense enabling this downward spiral, and is very reluctant to voice its concerns. Now, certainly, Okinawa is very vulnerable to devastation if there is a war over Taiwan. And so I certainly understand the concerns that the people of Okinawa have expressed. But I think one of the things that I would advise Okinawa to do is to have a dialogue with the rest of the Japanese people on the Japanese main islands, because given the advances in military technology, it's not just that Okinawa will be a target if there is a war, but it's quite probable that many places in the rest of Japan, even bases near Tokyo, could become targets. And so right now in Japan, there's a focus on how Japan should respond when there is a war. And certainly, Japan should prepare for the worst case scenario. But what I'm kind of discouraged about is in Japan, at least in the main islands of Japan, and especially in Tokyo, there's not enough emphasis on what can Japan do to actually prevent a war. And there's basically a talk about, well, the sacrifice of Okinawa to preserve Japan. And that certainly is, I think, a misguided approach, that if there is a war over Taiwan, it will not only affect Okinawa, but all of Japan, and therefore the Japanese government should play a much more active role in trying to prevent a Taiwan contingency in the first place. So I'd first like to give an opportunity for Governor Tamaki to respond, and then I'd like to open up the floor for questions.
Thank you
very much. As mentioned, yes, in any countries, when doing economic trade or interactions, win-win relationship is very important in order to maintain the stability in own country as well as the region as a whole, and that will ensure the stability for all. And that's the important idea. However, now my country first, this idea is spreading throughout the world, and thinking about own country is becoming more dominant in many countries. Actually, Russia and Ukraine has historical, racial, and ethnical reasons for the war, but it's not really talked about. And in the past, they had many conflicts, and that led to the large invasion of Russia by Russia of Ukraine. So before it develops into large conflict, we need to think about how to avoid the negative spiral. That is very important. I have been doing so-called talk caravan, or the rally to go to different cities and towns in Japan and talk about what Japan should think about to avoid the conflict. And because I want everyone in Japan to think about this. Past 3 years, because of COVID, I had to stop doing it. But this year, I have started doing this, going to different places in Japan. And actually, the issue of security in Okinawa is the talk about Japan and U.S. security alliance, because so everybody in Japan has the responsibility for maintaining Japan-U.S. security alliance, and I want people to think about it. And I use the base issues in Okinawa as an example. So as Dr. Mochizuki said, if Taiwan contingency happens, U.S. and China will be involved. And if the war takes place, the entire Japan will be involved. Of course, Okinawa will be the target. That is very clear. And we have to think that's why we have to avoid such situation from happening. But because just because China is increasing the military power, some people say we need to have more weapons, stronger military capability, and some people are rushing. And as you may know, when we rush, when we get panic, we lose rationality, we lose logic. So when we get panicked, we don't know what to do. We can make wrong decision. We need to avoid this kind of situation. That is important for the security, national security of Japan. So what I say is that young generations should go visit each other's countries and learn about each other's history and each other's idea, so that they can be bridges to connect countries, because national security can be achieved by human security. So from Okinawa, I am conducting this talk rally tour and telling the young generations that you are going to be the key for the safety and stability of this region. So what can Japan do means what can you do as an individual. So I want you who live in Washington, D.C. to think what the U.S. can do to maintain peace and stability? What can I do to maintain peace and stability? That's what I want you to think.
Thank you very much, Governor Tamaki. So I want to open up the floor to some questions. I mean, we're pressed for time, so please raise your hand, and I'll call on a couple of people. And if you can keep your question succinct, but first, state your name and your affiliation. So why don't we start with you, Amanda? And can we wait for the microphone?
Thank you. Thank you all so much for all of your great insights that you've given us so far. Tamaki Kiichi, 興味深いお話をありがとうございました。アマンダ・アールジェと申します。すみません。私はジョージ・ワシントン大学のアジア研究の大学院生です。はい。じゃあ質問は英語で。You mentioned earlier Okinawa's soft power and discussed a bit of its unique history and culture. And I'm also aware of the growing initiatives that have been coming around recently aimed at encouraging cultural and linguistic revitalization among Okinawans and other Ryukyuan peoples. So I was wondering, what role do you think such movements or other aspects of traditional or historical identity could play in the prefecture's political and or security situations? And thank you.
Okay, so thank you. And then maybe we can take a question in the back. Let's see. No one.
Other questions? 今、日本からジョージ・ワシントン大学に、安全保障政策専攻で大学院生として留学しております津川と申します。本日は。
I am so honored to meet with you today. You see, from myself, in terms of what is happening in Okinawa, that is what was in your presentation. I think the most important part is the reason behind it, what is happening. You have mentioned Governor, you have mentioned SOFA. There is a joint committee, a U.S. Japan joint committee. And the fact that, Governor, you have visited here in the United States, I think that is a very fact that you must discuss with the U.S. side. So I hope that you can talk and discuss on that. Thank you.
Amanda.
Can I ask your name again, please? Thank you, Amanda. Okay. Let me respond to the question posed by Amanda first. So, geographically, Okinawa is unique. It is oceanic, subtropical climate, so the temperature is very stable, and even in winter, golf courses are really green, and we hardly ever have snow, maybe once or twice. So, and for 450 years, Okinawa was a kingdom called the Ryukyu Kingdom, and even though it was a small kingdom, we had very good trading relationship with Asian countries. And China, Southeast Asian countries, and Japan were trading partners, and we imported various technologies or arts and crafts and ships. And so we gathered those in Ryukyu and learned from other countries. So that has actually led to the soft power Okinawa enjoys right now. So instead of competing or fighting or confronting with other countries, we imported techniques and technologies and knowledge and spread that among people. And when we have visitors, we welcome them. So we have a welcoming culture and a culture of hospitality. And that still exists in Okinawa. So if we are using this soft power in doing politics, we would like to make Okinawa a venue for dialogue, political dialogues, and how to develop in these Asian countries. And especially I want young people or women to be opinion leaders and take that kind of responsibility. So culture or nature are the asset of Okinawa, so I want people, visitors, to enjoy it. And also, in order to protect these assets and cultures, we need to think and communicate to others how we can protect these assets. And that kind of international efforts crossing borders should be done from Okinawa. And that's what I'm trying to achieve. And I am thankful to another question. And I said that the issue of national security is the discussion that should be done between Japan and U.S. And there is Japan-U.S. Security Alliance, and the status of agreements exists. And this is above Japanese constitution. So Prime Minister, people, and legislatures need to respect this status of forces agreement. So in order to maintain Japan-U.S. Security Alliance, this status of forces agreement, SOFA, cannot be amended easily. And there is a committee discussing about this SOFA, comprised of the representatives from both countries. And they have to have discussions in order to determine how to maintain this alliance. However, the topics of discussion and the course of discussions are not really recorded and announced. So it is in a black box. We don't know what has been discussed. That is an issue. So Okinawan people or Okinawa prefecture has been requesting, for example, the base access on base to conduct the survey on base about PFAS, because we are responsible to protect the lives of the citizens. However, if the U.S. rejects our request, Japanese government cannot say anything. So that kind of barrier covers the entire Japan. So the fundamental challenge to amend the SOFA should come from the proposal by the U.S. Otherwise, it cannot be really amended. And this situation remains for past 60 years. Did I answer your question?
So, Kristen, there's some online questions, so maybe kind of your top two or so. Okay.
Thank you. We do have several online questions, and I've taken the liberty of trying to push a couple together. The first comes from Dr. Steve Rapson. He would like for the panel or the governor to please comment on the increased deployment of the Japan Self-Defense Forces in Okinawa. Dr. Catherine Musick and another participant, Masahiro Yamagata, also expressed concerns about the expansion of military bases and the effect on the environment. And then another question from Dr. Anne Maria Shimabuku of New York University, directed at Dr. Swain. She said, although you emphasize Japan's agency to not participate in a Taiwan contingency, where is the historical precedent? And rather than a historical record, starting with the Battle of Okinawa, is that Okinawa has been used as a sacrificial island in order to buffer Japan from the adverse effects of belligerency. Particular order, either of those questions.
Okay, please go ahead, Governor. Yes, yes.
Okay, so which one should I answer? All of them?
Yes, or anyone. Maybe the first one. Yeah.
Hi.
Okay, then about the self-defense force. In 1972, Okinawa returned to Japan, and the self-defense force came to Okinawa. They started using the bases that used to be used or that had been used by U.S. forces. And at that time, people of Okinawa saw Japan Self-Defense Force as an imperial army, and there was strong rejection because at the end of the Battle of Okinawa, people were told that imperial army would protect them. However, actually, imperial army members sometimes moved people out of the shelter, and they went into the shelter. And imperial army and sometimes the civilians were in the shelter together. When a baby cries, imperial army would say, you have to do something with the baby. And a mother had to kill the baby in order to protect the entire group. That kind of tragedy took place during the battle. So people of Okinawa still remembered that. So for a while, people rejected the Japan Self-Defense Force. However, in the further remote islands, Miyako, Ishigaki, inhabited islands, there are 36 inhabited islands. And when there is somebody fell ill on the remote island, the Okinawa prefecture does not have a means to transport these people. Self-defense force helicopter actually comes to rescue that kind of a patient, to transport him or her from the remote island to the main island of Okinawa. Also, again, during the Battle of Okinawa, U.S. forces bombarded Okinawa, and many unexploded ordnance is still in Okinawa, and the self-defense force actually treats those or dispose of those unexploded ordnance. So self-defense force has been really helping, and people's ideas changed. However, in 2010, there was a plan to place radar bases of self-defense force on Miyako and Ishigaki Island. And the Yonaguni Island, the self-defense force base on Yonaguni Island, was the first to have that missile radar. And now Japanese government is proceeding with the plan to deploy missile bases on those remote islands. And the unit that had a radar, missile radar on Yonaguni Island is going to have missiles. So even though people of Okinawa started to trust the self-defense force, because of this deployment of actual missile, people of Okinawa now have distrust and anxiety. So even though the trust had been or has been built among Okinawans, there may be anxiety in future.
Would you want to repeat the question from Professor Shimabuku? Yes. Yeah.
Okay, again, this question is coming from Dr. Anne Maria Shimabuku of New York University. She says, Dr. Swain, although you emphasize Japan's agency to not participate in a Taiwan contingency, where is the historical precedent? Rather than the historical record, starting with the Battle of Okinawa, is that Okinawa has been used as a sacrificial island in order to buffer Japan from the adverse effects of its belligerency?
Well, I'm certainly not making the argument that Okinawa has independent agency on these on these sorts of questions. Okinawa is part of Japan. And as Mike said, the point here is whether or not there is a role for Okinawa in making an argument that relates to all of Japan that has to do with whether or not the limits that Japan has in its constitution, in how it deploys its military forces beyond its own territory, and how it relates to American forces based in Japan, deploying outside of Japan, not in the direct defense of the Japanese home islands, but beyond those home islands, whether or not that kind of position for Japan gives it some sort of leverage in urging, not departing from, but urging that there be a greater degree of restraint, a greater degree of attention paid to reassurance, as opposed to just how much military support can Japan give the United States in a Taiwan contingency, which tends to be the focus of the United States' attention. Japan needs to be clearer that it's in lockstep with the United States in dealing with whatever Taiwan contingency might emerge. You'll be right with us militarily. And that tends to assume that the judgment and the calculation of the United States is going to be the overriding consideration, whereas Japan needs to itself have its own assessment about when it's willing to or not willing to be able to be engaged in a conflict that goes beyond Japanese home islands. And that's the reference I'm making to in terms of agency. And as for its historical precedence, I mean, I don't know what that would be, but it's inherent, it seems to me, in the current situation that Japan faces and how it differs from the American position.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, I would agree with Professor Shimabuku that there isn't much historical precedent for Okinawa actually having agency. Right. And that in many ways, in the past, the Japanese imperial government would basically be the agents. Right. But given the critical juncture that we are at now, Okinawa needs to have the agency to convince Japan that it has the agency to constrain the current dynamic in U.S.-China relations over Taiwan. Right. And so, I certainly, believe that Professor Shimabuku's point is well taken, but that doesn't mean then that Okinawans should give up. But it's basically to convince the Japanese that they're in the same boat as well, exactly. And that Japan needs to have more agency rather than just being an appendage of U.S. strategy.
Right. Totally agree.
Okay, well, so I think we're out of time. So thank you very much, Governor Tamaki, and thank you very much, Michael Swain. And I want to turn things over to Dr. Kristen Luck.
Go ahead. So I would like to thank Governor Tamaki, Professor Mochizuki, and Dr. Swain for joining us this evening. And just in closing, we appreciate everyone coming and attending this event. This concludes this year's symposium. And the Okinawa Prefectural Government and DC will continue to hold events like this in the future. So please feel free to send us your comments and suggestions. We post basic information about Okinawa, recent developments, event announcements, et cetera, on the website. So please check it from time to time. Also, if you have any questions about the Okinawa collection here at GW, please feel free to contact me directly. Again, thank you for attending, and this concludes our 2023 Okinawa Symposium. Thank you.